Welcome, everybody. So nice to have you all here. Thank you so much for coming. I'm Laura Sylvester. I am the Public Policy Manager at the Food Bank of Western Massachusetts. I also lead the Western Mass Transportation Advocacy Network, which is the group that has organized this forum. So just a little bit about the Advocacy Network. We formed in the fall of 2019 after the first transportation forum that we organized as a result of the food bank just sort of realizing that lack of access to adequate transportation is a major cause of food insecurity. And so as we started to research what was happening in transportation in the four counties of Western Mass, we saw that there was a lot of really amazing, innovative work being done, but it seemed like it was being done in silos. People weren't really talking to each other. And so we thought, let's just bring everybody together and talk about what we're doing. And so we had about 150 people at that first meeting in Northampton. We had legislators and RTA employees and planners and transportation riders and people who worked at orgs like the food bank. And we just had a really amazing time. And from the enthusiasm of that meeting, we formed this Western Mass Transportation Advocacy Network. So we've been meeting pretty much monthly. We took a little break for COVID, but we've been meeting monthly via Zoom for the last 4 years, and we welcome anyone to join us. If you are not officially part of our group, there is a sign-up sheet on the registration table. Please leave us your name and your email, and we will add you to the list. We are open and welcome to all. And we are just, transit nerds of all stripes. Our goal is to leverage our shared voices and our work and bring attention to the great stuff that's happening. Is that better? Can you hear me better now? It's good, okay. To bring attention to the great work that's being done out here in the four counties of Western Mass, and most importantly, to advocate for increased transportation funding. So we're excited about the increase in transportation dedicated revenue that's going to come from the Fair Share Amendment and from Rep. Natalie Blay's RTA advancement bill. Rep. Blay is here. This bill would increase funding for the RTAs and provide more accessible and equitable transportation throughout the state. There's another group that's led by Alexis Walls of the Mass Public Health Association. She runs the RTA Advocates Coalition. We also meet monthly, and we do a lot of advocacy and work to try and pass that RTA and other bills like that. We're also passionate in our group about East-West Rail, microtransit, bike sharing, transportation for people with disabilities and medical needs, and much, much more. So please sign up to join us if you are not already a part. Just a show of hands, is there anybody here today who was at that original 2019 meeting in the Northampton Center of the Arts? Yes, thank you, great, awesome. These are the OG WMTAN people. So we have got a great program lined up today, and we'll be getting into it in just a minute with our keynote speaker. But first, I just want to give you a few logistical details. Bathrooms are right outside this hallway. The Wi-Fi, if you need it, is Judd's Guest, and the password is I love Judd's, all lowercase. That's the best Wi-Fi for this room. When we go into the other room, there's another Wi-Fi that you can connect to that we can tell you about later. I really want to give a huge thank you and shout out to our sponsors today, Tea for Mass and Instacart. Without their support, this forum would not be possible. Not only are they funding this forum, but they are making it so that we are giving it for you all free of charge. So thank you so much, Tea for Mass and Instacart. I also want to give a big thank you to our legislators, Rep. Pat Duffy, whose district we were in, Senator John Vilas. I don't think he could come today, but this is also his district. Shirley Arriaga, Brian Ash, Natalie Blay, Dan Carey, Joe Comerford, Mindy Dahm, Mike Finn, Adam Gomez. Senator Gomez, we wish you the speediest of recoveries. Senator Paul Mark, Jake Oliveira, Aaron Saunders, Todd Smola, and Bud Williams all are conveners of this forum, and we thank them for that. Also like to thank Johan Vega and Holyoke Media for filming this. We are going to be able to share the videotape with everybody afterwards. I will make sure you all get that link. Thank you also to Lindsay Hart and the team here at Gateway City Arts. If this is your first time here at Gateway City, I hope you'll come back to hear some music, see some art, eat some food. Gateway City is just an absolute treasure for our valley, and we love them so much. I also really want to thank my Forum Planning Committee, Rep. Lindsay Sabadosa, Ezekiel Baskin, Elizabeth Quirk, and Emily Reardon. This forum would absolutely not be possible without their hard work. And just one more thing about today's agenda. We're going to hear from our keynote speaker, Carrie LaValle, and then we're going to have presentations by 8 different groups who are doing innovative transportation-related work here in Western Mass. After each presentation, we're going to have a few minutes for questions. Emily and I are going to facilitate the questions. There was a microphone somewhere that we're going to pass around in the audience so that everybody will be able to hear the questions and that the video will be able to pick it up. If you don't have enough time to ask a question right after the presentation, don't worry. After lunch, we're going to have breakout working sessions where there will be a chance to do deeper dives into each of these subject areas. So we're going to have 2 breakout sessions in this room, 2 in the big theater across the beer garden way, and 2 in the restaurant behind us. We will tell you which one is going to be where. So we are going to, those conversations will last for 45 minutes, and then we're going to do a report out from each group back to the full group. So please dedicate somebody at your table to take notes to report back. And then if there's something that you don't see covered that you want to talk about, you can also feel free to start your own group in another type of discussion. We're also free to stay here till 3 p.m., so if you're deep into discussion and you want to keep going, you can do that. So any questions on any of that? All right, so I want to bring up Pat Duffy, who is going to say a few words. Welcome, Representative Patricia Duffy.
So I get to do 2 really fun things. One is welcome you to the great city of Holyoke. Thank you so much for being here. Please come back. You can see what great resources we have here. And the other thing I get to do, because she gave thanks to everybody, is I get to thank Laura. So thank you. You know, this work wouldn't happen without you. You can see what a rock star she is. And I know from personal experience, working with her on projects, like, she gets it done. So thank you, Laura.
Thank you so much, Pat. Okay, so now it's my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Carrie LaValle. Carrie is the Deputy Administrator and Chief Engineer at MassDOT. She will be responsible for MassDOT's expanded $1.5 billion a year capital program that includes new federal infrastructure funding and one of the largest investments in bridges in the Commonwealth's history. Carrie has served in multiple roles at MassDOT, starting out as a civil engineer out of college, and she worked her way up through project management. She most recently served as the District 6 Project Development Engineer before becoming Deputy Administrator and Chief Engineer. She has also been a longtime member of MassDOT's Underwater Bridge Inspection Team, which sounds terrifying, performing inspections throughout Massachusetts. Carrie is a licensed professional engineer, a certified bridge inspector, an active member of WTS International. She has a BS in civil engineering from the University of Massachusetts Amherst. Gotta love that local connection. Please give a warm welcome to Carrie LaValle.
So as mentioned, I'm Carrie LaValle. I'm the Chief Engineer at MassDOT, and I was told I had 15 minutes, so I have a lot of information to throw at you guys. I'll try not to speak too quickly, but a lot of exciting work has been happening. So to just start off, I kind of want to go over our last year in review. As mentioned, we had a successful delivery. This is the first time when we had a lot of our increased funding, and we had over 185 projects get advertised across the state. And in fact, it was $1.77 billion that we did in Massachusetts alone, which is a lot more than we've ever done in the past. As you can see on the chart, it kind of has a breakdown on how we're splitting up our projects into different quarters and how we're attempting to really balance the needs of everybody. Now, this is our current year in review. To date, we have 198 planned projects this year, and with that, we're again going to be at about 1.4, we are assuming, but similar to last year, we started out at 1.5 and we ended up at 1.7, so we're not sure. We could get the opportunity to do some more federal aid projects, but this is where we are to date. So as you can see, we're progressing on these projects, and they're all over Massachusetts. So what I kind of wanted to focus on, just because I saw who was here today, was really on the municipal funding opportunities that Massachusetts is providing in the DOT. And I really want to emphasize that we're here to help you on this. So I am going to focus on some success we've had with it, but again, I want to emphasize that we have District 1 and District 2 are great offices to be working with, and they can really assist you if you have real questions about this. And in our headquarters office back in 10 Park Plaza, we also have a team that can help people with their grants, whether they're federal or municipal grants. So again, I'm just going to do a quick overview of all these different types of programs, and then we'll go into more detail on each slide. So Chapter 90, everyone should be aware of what that is, but it entitles cities and towns for reimbursement on transportation projects. It's a formula-based apportionment. It's determined by lane miles and population and employment. There was some new guidance that came out recently, 2021, but recently that you could find some additional information on this. We really wanted to overhaul our website to kind of simplify it. So I would really recommend that you go there. It's reorganized, it's simplified, it's a little bit easier to go through the process. But if you have questions, I strongly recommend that you also reach out to our district offices, and they can really walk you through some of that process. We do have the initiation of projects online now, and they can really assist you with how to do that. They're really helpful. They have strong planning groups in those districts that can move you in the right direction to get these projects moving forward. The next is the Complete Streets Funding Program. This again is to encourage people to incorporate complete streets into their designs. I know that can be overwhelming sometimes for certain communities, but it's an opportunity to get technical assistance, and also it's an opportunity to really provide safe and accessible travel for all roadway users, which is something at Mass DOT we find really important. We want to make sure, regardless of age or ability, that you're protected, and this can include sidewalk jobs, bike lanes, side paths, curb extensions, and more. We have a tiered approach, so as you can see on the screen, it kind of has a 3-tiered approach. There's opportunities for grants for all those tiers, but the first tier is more of a planning grant. It kind of helps you understand what our Complete Streets policy is, and you take some training, and it helps you kind of get a policy for your community. The next one is when we really help you guys develop a 5-year Complete Streets prioritization, so that within your community you understand where it makes the most sense to invest the money first. And then lastly, you can apply for construction funding to really actually do these Complete Streets designs. And I was able to pull up one that happened in Hinsdale, which, as you can see, is a rural population, and they were able to get some systematic safety issues resolved going through the Complete Streets grant program. So it was a great opportunity. They put in ADA compliant sidewalks, ramps, crosswalks, and they were able to even install some speed feedback signs, which we found really helps communities slow down traffic. It's a speed management tool. And then just to highlight, we have in the next 5 years, the opportunity to spend $75 million on this, so please apply. Next would be the local bottleneck reduction program. This is another good program that we have that is meant to be a competitive application that gives up to $500,000 in construction funding. It's a project that can get designed at no cost because Mass DOT actually will help you design it. So we have Mass DOT consultants on board to help design these bottleneck locations. And an eligible project would be anything like an addition of a turn lane or a through lane, just geometric changes to the roadway, improved pavement markings, signage, and even new signal equipment. So there's $25 million available over the next couple of years, and we really recommend that people reach out for these. Our next program, which has been a huge success, this was something that we heard from a lot of communities that even though they had Chapter 90, especially on our state numbered routes, it was still very difficult for them to be able to continue to pave. So a couple of years ago, we initiated the municipal pavement program. What it is we really want to work with local communities to improve the condition of their state numbered owned roads. There's a misconception that Mass DOT owns every state numbered route. I think anyone who is a DPW director or an engineer in their town knows that's not true. So we've provided this as an opportunity to kind of go into these communities that own the state numbered routes, help them go in and repave the area. We selected it based on the pavement condition. It's locally owned state routes, as I emphasized again, and it's just trying to provide some equity to different communities that maybe were overwhelmed and found that Chapter 90 wasn't really reaching their goals. The design and the construction is managed by Mass DOT, so as we go through and do the analysis on the pavement, we do reach out to the different communities. Sometimes they add in some elements beyond just pavement, but we think that's a great opportunity to really coordinate on what the community needs for their pavement in these locations. What I have on the next screen, which can be hard to see, is actually all different links that we've done. I mean, I know you guys don't really care about Worcester East, but as you can see, if you look at Worcester West, there's actually been quite a few locations that have had the opportunity to participate in this, and we think it's been a huge success. Just to highlight what the different colors mean, I wanted to let you guys know that these are just ones that are in different phases. So blue are ones that were advertised in 2022, so they're probably done at this point or close to. Red are ones getting done in 2023, and then green is done in 2024, so the proposed ones coming through. The next program, which is another program that we've kind of expanded upon, the municipal bridge program has actually been here for a while, but we were finding that there was a lot of difficulty with the design of the project, so we kind of expanded the way that we do this. Initially, we were only providing construction funds, and the communities were still required to pay for the design, and we were finding in some of our more rural communities that that was very difficult, and they were very overwhelmed with that process. So what we've added now is another opportunity for a phase 1 grant, and what that does is it provides the ability for us to help you out with the design itself. You can come to us and you can have a MassDOT-led consultant actually take over the design of the project, and then that really does help you go into phase 2. If for some reason you already have a consultant in place that you're comfortable with using within your community, we also are able to provide assistance in some of the costs for that. And we found that this way we could be helping with the design and not just kind of leaving it in the hands of communities that maybe weren't as familiar with our bridge process. And when I say small bridge, the reason why we really wanted to highlight this is these are the 10 to the 20 foot range bridges that for some reason are not counted with federal highways, so you cannot get federal funding for them. So that's the other reason why we've been really trying to push these. And I, again, want to emphasize the ability to reach out to us for design costs, which previously we did not do, and we're really trying to get communities on board with this. If you can see here, this is actually a highlight of all the communities that were able to get small bridges done, and you can see there's obviously quite a bit that are out in the Western Mass area, so they did take advantage, and I'm just hoping you guys continue to do so. Next is the Shared Streets and Spaces program. This one was originally created during COVID when a lot of communities were looking at alternative ways to kind of provide outdoor space for their communities, but it was such a success that we've just kept it going. It's meant to be like a quick build project that supports public health and also safe mobility and renewed commerce. Again, this, a lot of people may have seen in their downtowns where we kind of helped out maybe the town with putting up, areas for restaurants, put outdoor seating and suggestions like that. Some people use it for farmers markets or for concerts, but again, it was a way to provide outdoor space for people. We launched it, as I mentioned before, during COVID, but we found that it's just something that the communities really wanted, and so we kind of have expanded it to include sidewalks and paths, bike facilities, outdoor dining, as I mentioned before, but also traffic calming and bus lanes, because we found that's another opportunity for people to really find other ways to move around the community. So as you can see, some examples of ones that we put out. We're in the process of, just this year alone, we've had 184 grants, and we really want you to be creative with this. We're looking at different ways to kind of provide these shared streets and spaces. Not last, but RAP funding. This is one that we came out, again, this was something where we got a lot of feedback, and the legislature, and at the time in April of 2022, realized that we needed to do some winter recovery assistance program, which we call RAP, because obviously it's hard to say. And this was approved for about $100 million. Again, this is distributed via formula base, similar to the Chapter 90 on locally owned roadway mileage. But this is just a shout out that all communities have to spend it by June 30th. I was supposed to just really emphasize, please put your bills in, please spend your money. But it can be used to rehab, reconstruct, resurface roads, but it can also be for bike lanes, it can be for sidewalks, it can be replacing guardrail, traffic control devices, maybe that got damaged during the winter. And so it is a lot of opportunity, and especially roadway paving and striping is another great way to use this. So please make sure you spend it by June 30th. And again, this is just kind of an update so I can give you the latest status on all the different programs. But again, we are in the process now. The Chapter 90 website has been updated. It has the letters out for 24, so you can check that out. The Complete Streets Funding Program, we're due in May, and so people should be hearing who received those opportunities. We have the Local Bottleneck Reduction Program, which again, the application was in March 31st, so people will hear about those in July. We have the Municipal Pavement Program. We're going to continue to talk with municipalities for fiscal year 24 this spring, and we're working through our implementation of those ones I showed you for 23 that was on the map. We still have the Municipal Small Bridge Program. There's a new grant round opening that opened at May 1st, and it's closing at the end of June, so we'd really appreciate if people are interested to apply. Again, Shared Streets is continuing. Another grant round is in 24, but we don't have the set date now. And lastly, the Winter Recovery Assistance Program, which again, I emphasize, funds close on June 30th. But 98% of communities under contract with Mass DOT for these funds have been participating. So we just want you guys to keep spending. I think this will somehow get posted, because I know you obviously can't press these hyperlinks right now. I mean, that would be impressive, but I can't have you do that. But these are the links. So there is a great website. We're working actually to set up one location for a lot of these with links. We're just, getting there. But that's our plan, is that we'd have basically one portal for municipalities to access everything to. But for now, we do have websites set up for everybody, so you can at least go in and kind of read. You can see where other communities had projects, and it is interesting. It gives you a little more detail. So then I just wanted to emphasize, I did ask my team to kind of pull what the numbers were in Western Mass. So as you can see, just in the sum cost of Chapter 90 was about $1 billion, and then in statewide programs was $3 billion. And then we kind of broke it up into District 1 and District 2, so you guys could see the sum cost of what we've been spending. And the next one is I just was highlighting a couple of projects that are in design or just about starting construction. So these were a couple of the bigger projects that we've had over the years. And although ADA retrofits might not seem like a large project, it affected a lot of communities. So that's why I kind of wanted to highlight that one. So these are great projects that kind of come in and just redo curb ramps that are substandard to really make it more accessible for people. So that one, again, it's not a huge cost, but it's a huge benefit. So these are just a kind of a variety of different projects we did that are in the works. And when it says notice to proceed, that means it's out with the contractor. When it says advertise, that means it's about to advertise, so contractors can bid on it. And then the ones obviously in September just haven't advertised yet. But this was just kind of just to give you guys an idea of some of the different types of projects we're working on. And then I just wanted to go into a little bit more detail on a couple of ones that we've had success with. So this was to highlight one that we did as a quick build, which was in West Springfield, Westfield, Route 20, and hopefully everyone here likes this project as I go into detail on it. But the idea was really to reduce speed. If you look on the left side, you can see there was a lot of pavement in that area, and speed was a real concern. So we kind of, as a quick build, went in and we had the wide cross-section reduced. It was much wider than a standard right turn lane. So we were able to go in, and without even taking any right-of-way in the whole area, we were just able to restripe it and kind of tighten up the travel lane. And it added a buffer bike lane too, which made it possible for bikes to feel a little safer if they want to travel on this road. And then we kind of went through and we were able to improve some pedestrian improvements. As you can see, the sidewalks obviously does not have a huge puddle. There's ramps and crosswalks, so I'm sure that you can see that it's a dramatic improvement, and they went through and it really made a big difference for slowing down speeds. Another example of one that's going to be, I believe, having a ribbon cutting pretty soon is the Westfield Columbia Greenway extension. It's expected to be completed this summer. It's a key trail connector span across 5 newly rehabbed bridges through downtown Westfield. On the Elm Street Bridge, a parklet will be constructed for walkers and cyclists to stop, rest, and relax. And again, this is a signature part of an 80-mile, nearly complete cross-state shared use path between Northampton and New Haven, Connecticut. So we're very excited for this to be done, and I hope you guys have had a chance to kind of go and check it out. The next one is one that I'm kind of excited about that we're trying to do. So recently we had the opportunity to work with Springfield on a federal grant, and the project that we worked with them on was called the Safe Route, what is it called? SS4A, Safe, I'm trying to think of how they say it. Safe Streets for All. That's what it is. Safe Streets for All. And so we were originally working with Springfield because we knew they needed some systematic improvements. So we worked with them, and they ended up winning the grant, and that made us really feel positive that we could help a community. So then we kind of went through and we were like, what other federal grants are out there that communities would be interested in? That maybe right now we don't have federal funding for, but we think are great opportunities. And this is one that I wanted to highlight because I actually didn't know how many otters and muskrats were in the area, but I was told that this Campusa Bog is vital to the community, and there's a culvert that these muskrats and otters and other creatures were getting injured, and they can't go through the culvert. So we're in the opportunity right now where we're going to go for what they call a Protect grant, and we think this will be a really great project. This is one that we're going to work with Stockbridge on, and it seems small, but we think it should make a real difference for not only the community, but obviously all the critters that live in that bog. And then with that, I would be remiss, even though I am obviously highway oriented, that I was asked for my other division leads to kind of highlight some of the great projects that they're doing as well. So the aeronautics division just wanted to kind of show in this region some of the locations that they're investing in over the next couple of years. So obviously their focus is on a lot of these airports that people know about, the municipal airports. I don't know exactly what they're doing, but you can see there's a huge investment on their end to make these better. I'm assuming they're working with these different communities, and they will be spending a lot of money in this area over the next couple of years. And then the Community Transit Grant Program. Again, this is another grant program, but this one is provided through our Rail and Transit group. They're dedicated to really working with RTAs and other transportation providers. So they wanted to join in celebrating the innovative work of the FRTA, PVTA, and other regional transit authorities and what you guys are doing across the Commonwealth. For example, they were pleased to support PVTA's Route B79 that provides service between Amherst and Worcester for having provided early support to the FRTA Access Microtransit Program and for helping to fund FRTA's new environmentally friendly maintenance facility. 3 of the services being featured today received some of their funding through Mass DOT's Community Transit Grant Program. And they had an annual competitive funding program which provided funding to regional transit authorities, municipalities, and nonprofits to expand mobility for older adults and people with disabilities. Rail and Transit was pleased to be longtime supporters of Quabog Connector and Hilltown CDC, and to have recently provided grants to Great Barrington for their microtransit pilot. All 3 are great examples of municipalities and organizations partnering together to coordinate services. And the Connector Transit Granite Program is currently accepting applications for fiscal year 24, operating a mobility management cycle. And they really wanted me to encourage that you guys check out their website and try and apply for some of these grant opportunities. And that's it. I don't know if I'm supposed to answer questions for the. Do you want me to?
Yeah.
Does anyone have any questions? Okay.
All right, thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Thank you so much, Chief LaValle. Big round of applause. It's really exciting to hear about all of that grant money that's available. I am going to take that back to my town manager and let her know that those things are available. And I think I can speak for everyone who lives in the Upper Valley that we are going to be really, really happy when that Route 9 project is done. Dawn, do you have a question? Sorry? Yes, yes. Did this just die? Hello? Okay. Yes, I will be sending out all of the slides and all of the links and all of the relevant information. Okay, so now we're going to get into hearing about some of these exciting programs that Chief LaValle just mentioned. First up, she didn't mention this, but we're going to hear from Dave Chrysopoulos and Hunt Chase about the Hilltown Community Development. They're from Hilltown Community Development, and they're going to talk to us about the CDC mobile market that they have been doing for the last few years. And we've got Emily is going to sit right in front here, and she's going to hold up a piece of yellow paper when you've got a minute left of time. We're going to try and keep to time, and then she's going to hold up a red piece of paper when it's time to stop. So no pressure, but we just want to make sure that we have time for everyone. And there will be some time for questions after each presentation, so I'll come back up and help facilitate the questions. So please welcome Hunt and Dave.
Thanks, Laura. We don't have anything fancy to share with you guys. We're just going to talk to you.
Okay.
And it's mostly going to be Hunt. I'm Dave Christopoulos. I am the Executive Director at Hilltown CDC. We're located in Chesterfield, and we have a satellite office in Chester. And it's good for us to, thanks for inviting us. It's good for us to get out of the hills a couple times a year and see that there's civilization out here. So just really briefly, we've been around since the early 80s as a CDC, and we kind of do a little bit of everything in the Hilltowns. Yeah, we do a little bit of everything up there. We serve large area. Typically, we're looking at like 23 town area, from what you would see as Williamsburg on this end of things, all the way over to Dalton, Berkshire County, and then from like Russell over to Ashfield. So we're kind of doing all four directions. And in addition to what Hunt's going to talk about, we're an affordable housing developer, and we do community facility development for a lot of our towns. Our towns are very small and generally don't have paid staff. So we do a lot of municipal work that was talked about today. And we really look at it as a system and a design issue up there. And so transportation, clearly a system design thing. Hunt's going to talk a little bit about what we do up in the Hilltowns with transportation. And we don't just transport people, we transport food. So he's going to talk a little bit about how we get food to people and how people get food from us, working with local farms. The other thing that I wanted to mention is we also been working in the mobility world quite a bit. It's not just transportation, but walking and safe, healthy walking. We have a program that's funded partly through DPH and with DOT to work with each of our towns to develop safe walking maps. And that is now evolving into talking with the towns about the Complete Streets program that you heard about. And so helping our towns become designated and receive those funds so that they can do projects with state money around safe walking, complete streets, eligible activities, that kind of thing. And I think that's enough of me. I'm going to hand it over to Hunt. He's going to tell you a little bit more about these programs and what we're doing up in the hills. And by the way, come up to the hill towns if you don't. It's really fun and beautiful. And we just released our summer brochure for the hill towns, working with the chamber. It's coming out. You'll see it distributed all over the valley. All the fairs are listed this year that are coming up. It's really fun. Come to the Cummington Fair. And check it out. We have a big art studio tour coming up this summer that we're promoting our artists and our farmers. And it's really worth taking a trip up there and checking it out. And if you want to know more about it, stop at our office. Thanks a lot. Here's Hunt.
Hi everyone, thank you. So yeah, we're here to talk about the mobile market, but I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that we also have the driver pool, which is a volunteer-based transportation service, and the Hilltown Easy Ride van that is run through a contract with the FRTA. And because we live in an area with no fixed route service, you know, it's really important to have these two options for seniors, veterans, and folks with disabilities up there for sure. But let's talk about the thing I'm really excited about. It's the mobile market. We have now entered into our 5th year. We've evolved over the years for sure. So if you want to go back to the roots, it's 5 farms, maybe 35 people for a customer base. We used to drive around in our little van, do 2 pop-up markets, and that was about it. So 2021, we reached about 120 folks that we were servicing that same way, and it became increasingly impossible to predict what people are actually going to want to buy at these mobile markets, and we had to turn folks away because there wasn't enough tomatoes or whatever, strawberries maybe, as they come back into the season. So we and the team, we took a moment, we talked about it, and we decided that it made the most sense for us to switch into an online ordering platform. And with that, we are able to increase the farms that were participating. We went from 5 for the first couple of years. We worked with 26 last season. And we had those same 4 distribution locations for the first couple of years. And then this past year, we transitioned into having 18 different distribution locations throughout the hill towns. This came about through partnerships with local businesses that would host a 4-hour pickup distribution window. So people for free could order their groceries online, have it delivered to whatever corner store or convenience store was closest to them. And then for seniors that were living in the subsidized apartment complexes, we were offering home delivery, which was great. So here we are, this year, right? So what's the big stuff? Like, we just opened our brick and mortar grocery store. We're up at Sawyer Farm in Worthington. It's open 7 days a week. You can come in, squeeze the tomatoes, buy exactly what you want. It's really great. We've now adapted this into a year-round food access program, focusing on food access through a lens of economic development for rural growers, right? Because if farms aren't getting paid equitable wages, then there's no food for everyone. And so we really hyper-focus on that. But we also do make sure that economics do not stand as a barrier for anyone to access these local foods. So through different grant sources, we were able to, MDAR's Local Food Purchasing Grant Assistance, really powerful grant for those that received it this year. We're able to give away roughly $40,000 worth of free food to folks that identify as self-identify as food insecure. And that's roughly 40% of the population that we serve. We've also, with this transition into having a brick and mortar store, we are continuing with the distribution locations that we had last year. We are running with this new pilot of home delivery for a fee, so anyone can use this service if it's more convenient for them. And that's a sliding scale fee. Again, economics are no barrier for food access, right? So with this transition, we've also now been working with forage and grocerists to be able to accept SNAP payments online. Because I know any of you that are familiar with this, it's impossible. You're not supposed to set up different markets or systems to deal with people depending upon what their payment structure is, but the system actually kind of forces you to. We had to, last year, paper notes about who paid with SNAP, and then we had to host different pickups and limit the time window that people are actually able to get their food during it. So this year, if all goes well, fingers crossed, and we get that approval, people are now going to be able to use their SNAP benefits online, they can still order online using a credit card if they want. They can come to the store, use the SNAP benefits or the HIP benefits. This is really about food for all and building community around food. I feel like that's pretty good. If you want me to go on more, I will, but yeah.
Take some questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Yeah. Oh.
Do you want to send? Let me send it out.
Perfect.
You know what I'm going to ask.
I'm curious. I'm really curious.
A couple people here know what I'm going to ask.
Somebody's got a thing over there.
And he was being our test subject.
It should be on.
What is on now?
How do you find, are people using the Healthy Incentives Program? Do they know about it? And
That's tricky. Yes, people are using it. Most folks do not know about it.
Right.
And it's like this secret thing. So as people come into the store, we're like, have you used your HIP yet this month? And they're like, no, what is that? So then we educate them, separate it all out. And we're actually the only HIP vendor in our whole region, which is huge. So yeah, and as I said before, that's roughly 40% of the customer base is SNAP and HIP. So we are making sure we're informing and educating people and also giving them a list about it.
thank you so much, and we'll keep working on making that easier for you.
Pat, do you want to give
Thank
a
you.
quick explanation of what HIP is, real quick?
For those who don't know, the Healthy Incentives Program allows folks who use SNAP benefits to buy fresh produce and fruit, and that's what you buy, you get money back onto your SNAP card. So it's a win-win for farmers, for recipients, for everybody, and so spread the word.
I wanted to just mention one other thing that keeps coming into my mind as I was listening to Hunt talk about this awesome work that he's doing. This would not have been possible a few years ago before we actually had connection to the internet up there. So a lot of people in this room know what I'm talking about, but it took over a decade for us to get broadband in the hill towns, and it really was the most important economic development achievement for our towns and for people in their homes to be able to, the kids to do homework, whatever, go down the list, right? But to be able to order food online in a community like this where the rest of the world is doing that is such a huge thing for our folks up there, and us too, to be able to operate this way. I mean, we could barely run the nonprofit during COVID because we didn't have broadband until halfway through. We finally got it. But, you know, I want to thank legislators, how hard they worked on that over the past so many years, because it really has changed the game for us in the hill towns. And Hunt was able to build this thing out, like this really complicated point of sale service. I don't think it would have been able to fly with like a dial-up connection or whatever. So I just wanted to say that because it is a large system up there that we're dealing with, and these things, you know, are essential to be able to do this kind of work. So yeah, I just wanted to make that point.
Next question.
Yes, do you just do the farm to farm to people?
We have a few wholesale accounts too, so we do farm to institutions as well. We have roughly 5 different restaurants we work with, plus the R.H. Conwell School in Worthington. So, yes, we do it all. We do it all.
Got one more question.
Thank you. So you brought up the internet, and we're in Sunderland, South County Senior Center. And how did you address sort of the digital divide with your seniors to help them be able to order online?
Oh, that's a question for you, but we do help them with paper if they need to, but we have put staff at the COAs and worked with the councils on aging to identify people who need help, and yeah, we've held hands around that. Because there is a whole learning thing with now that we have broadband. The councils on aging in the hill towns are pretty active and work as a what's the word they use? No, not coalition, but
Consortium.
consortium. Yes, thank you. So it's a consortium. They work really well together. So we do a lot of work with the COAs, and I think strength in numbers is one reason it works pretty good. But we partner with them around grants sometimes, and we did have a digital literacy grant a couple of years ago that was through a federal partner. But there's more work to be done there. That's an important question that you brought up, because it's not just literacy, it's connectivity and affordability. And we still have, in some of our towns, we still don't have full coverage. My mother-in-law lives in Savoy. They only have a Wi-Fi option. They don't have fiber to the home. It's complicated, confusing. The speed's not as good as some of else. So it's not totally equitable at this point. I think it will eventually become that, but this has been a really costly project. So we're patient. But yeah, it's an issue, for sure.
All right, we're going to have to move on. Thank you so much. That was really great. We're going to have the opportunity in the breakout sessions, if you want to have more questions for Hunt and Dave, please save them for then. Ezekiel has got the slides together. So now we are going to hear from Jen Healy about the Quabog Connector. Jen, or somebody from Quabog was at our original forum in 2019 and talking about what was then kind of still new with the Quabog Connector, and they have done so much in the last 4 years. It's really impressive what they're doing out in Ware, Palmer, in that area. They really were sort of the first microtransit thing to happen in Western Mass, and they've really set the standard, and they're really leading the way. So we're really happy to welcome Jen Healy.
Hi everybody, thank you to Laura. I'm Jen Healy. I'm the Rural Transit Program Manager for Quabog Valley CDC. So I run all of our transportation initiatives, namely the Quabog Connector. I'll offer tutorials on how to spell Quabog later today if anyone's interested. So I just want to talk to you a bit about our different programs and how we've evolved over the last few years, and also sort of where our eye is right now as far as transportation in a rural area of Massachusetts goes. Here are some fun photos. The top right is the vans that most folks associate with us. The bottom picture is actually the B79, which we help run with the Pioneer Valley Transit Authority that was mentioned earlier in the presentation. And then top left is our collaboration with Bay State. That's our Health Connector van, which I'll talk a bit about. And first, I just want to talk a bit about where we are. So we serve 10 towns in the Quabog region, so sort of Belchertown to East Brookfield, from west to east, and then up to, of course, I can't read my own slide, but this is our service area, and so we go down to Munson as well, and you can see that we are 3 counties, which makes things a little bit difficult sometimes, and it's a pretty large service area that we have for a relatively small initiative. These are some basics on our program. So we have the Quabog Connector. We're demand response primarily, so instead of having predetermined stops and a set schedule, we pick folks up and we take them where they need to go anywhere in the service area. Rides are $2 each way for that program. That is sort of our central program. But if $2 per way is a barrier for folks, we're not in the business of turning anyone away. That would sort of be counterintuitive to what we're doing. But that program started in 2017. It's a public-private partnership between the Quabog Valley CDC and the town of Ware. And we've expanded a lot since then. So mentioned earlier was the Amherst to Worcester route with the B79. That route started in September of 2021 and is showing really incredible promise. It is really the only route of its kind that crosses our region along Route 9. It goes from the UMass Amherst campus in the west to Union Station in Worcester. And we operate the vehicles, and then the Pioneer Valley Transit Authority provides the vehicle and administrative support. So that's something that we're really excited about. We also have the Palmer Rides to Work program, which offers half-price rides, so $1 each way for low-income Palmer residents traveling for work or employment-related purposes. So that could be training, it could be a job interview, and we really love that program and being able to do that for the community. And then in 2022, we launched the Bay State Health Connector van, which is a partnership with Bay State. Mary Lane Hospital in Ware is in the process of closing. Much of it has already closed. And so that meant for our folks, our population, they were used to taking a short trip to Ware for medical care. Now they were sort of faced with a 10-mile, 20-minute car ride to Palmer at Bay State Wing, and we knew that was going to be a barrier, and so did Bay State, and so they partnered with us to provide free rides to Bay State facilities with this program. That's grown quite a bit. We're really excited about that. And then in 2022, we also took over senior transportation for the Ware Council on Aging. They've been a partner with us for a long time, so we're excited to be able to bring that under one roof and provide extended hours for dedicated senior travel and be able to better coordinate since it was all sort of under our umbrella. And then lastly, veterans have ridden the Quabog Connector for free since the summer of 2022. That is the lightning version of the programs that we offer. And this, I know, is tough to see, and my microphone isn't helping, or that microphone isn't helping, but okay. This is all-time ridership through 2022. And mostly what I want to show with this is that in 2017, when this project was launched, that first month in January, we gave 5 rides. But by April, they were nearing 400 rides a month. And these days, it's anywhere between 900 to 1,100 rides per month, which is a really big deal, and it is really only limited by the resources that we have. We're not a large staff, so drivers and vehicles is really what limits the number of rides that we can give per month. But you can see that it's continued to grow, also of note is in 2020 you can see where the pandemic happened and where it dipped, but it almost immediately started to build back up again. Folks really need this service. These are some basics of our numbers. Like I said, we're anywhere between 900 and 1,100 rides per month. In 2022, that meant we gave 13,600 and change rides to a little under 500 distinct riders. It's important to note that we're in a rural area. Our rides average about 7 miles per trip, about 20 minutes, which is more time and more distance than you'd see in a more urban environment. That makes a big difference for us in terms of the numbers that come back. And then I also want to point out that almost 60% of our rides every month take people to work. We know that steady employment is another really important social determinant of health. So if we're able to get folks to and from work, if they can hold that job because our service exists, that just sort of, the benefits for the community compound in that way. And then the other thing that I wanted to mention is that the Quabog Connector is for anybody who wants to ride, but we do prioritize folks over 60 and people with disabilities. And if you look at this top chart here, you can see that a large percentage of both our riders and our rides go to both of those communities. And that is something that we are sort of always have an eye on, that we want to emphasize and that we want to continue doing. Lastly, on this slide, this bottom chart here, what I really want you to pay attention to is the average trips per rider. All of these numbers are things that we're excited about. Something that is very exciting to me is to see our services sort of become embedded in the community and to see people using them. And so what you can see here is that folks are using our services multiple times, right? So I think one of the best examples of that is the Bay State Health Connector van. Folks are not just using that van for a one-off appointment. Folks are using it to get regular medical care, which is the point, one of the many goals of our services is for folks to be able to access regular medical care so that when they finally get to the hospital, it's not because it was an emergency. They were able to receive that care before it became an emergency. And so we've seen that program grow greatly over the last year or so. And we have one rider who expressed to us that having the Bay State Health Connector van is the only reason that they were able to attend their prenatal appointments. And that's the kind of difference that we want to make. And so all that is to say, our region is rural. Our population is older than the state average generally. Our population is also lower income than the state average. And that makes a difference in the kind of impact that transportation can make. And so the last thing, and what we kind of have our eye on, and I'm going to share some quotes with you in a minute, is that there's much more to the story of impact when it comes to transportation in a rural area than just these numbers. We're really excited about this, right? But if you were to put these on a chart next to Boston or Worcester or Springfield, they probably wouldn't even show up, right? I couldn't make this big enough for you all to see it. But we also know that there's much more to it than that. And we know that transportation really only works for folks if they can rely on it and if they can plan their lives around it. And so one of the best ways we know how to demonstrate that impact is from talking to our riders. And so I'm going to share just some quotes. I'm not going to read them to you storybook style, I promise. But I want you to sort of take three things from my final 3 slides here. And one is that we know that transportation can work in a rural area because we see it and people tell us that they like it. And we see our riders come back to us again and again and express their enthusiasm for this program. As you can see in some of these quotes here, they like our services. We know it can work even in our rural area. The second thing I want you all to take from this is that in a rural area, not having services is much higher stakes, oftentimes. Being the only service means that if they can't get a ride from us, they miss a doctor's appointment, they don't go to work that day, they don't get their infusion, and so there's that. And then the last thing I'll say, because I've received my red sign, is that we need much more of it. And I think that's demonstrated here from these quotes. So we have an eye towards making sure that we can continue to provide these services and bring more services to rural areas like ours because we know it makes that difference.
Hello, so you get 1,000 rides a month, $2 a ride on average. That's only $2,000 of income. Your operating budget's got to be a lot higher than that. Do you have an idea where all that rest of the funding, Bay State, do you have the breakout of that funding?
Sure. So we are funded in a few different ways. We have a large we have a large grant from the Health Foundation of Central Massachusetts. We're part of what's called the Synergy Initiative. Those are 5-year grants from the Health Foundation that are really meant to expand these types of programs and make them sustainable. We are in year 4 of 5 currently. So that first year was like 2019. Was the first year of that grant. We also, the Community Transit Grant Program was mentioned earlier. We, for several years, have received money from that program for operating expenses and I think a couple of years for capital expenses like the vehicles as well. And then we have a contract with Bay State for that program I mentioned. And then we have a variety of contributions from municipalities and I think, like a single private donation from an organization in the community. But that's part of it, right, is looking towards sustainability and finding those multi-year, long-term funding sources.
So I just have a question about the common rights to work and the general public line in your, on your slide. So where you had an increase in all the other categories, which seemed like your main focus categories, 22 to 23, you actually had not only a decrease in numbers, but also a decrease in ride per person. I was wondering if you have an explanation for what happened in that time period.
Yeah, absolutely. On the Palmer Rides to Work, and that program is one of the few programs with us where you have to, because of the funding structure, where you have to apply to be in it, and also because it is specific to Palmer residents. Folks move and folks get different jobs. Folks move in and out of eligibility, and we've seen a bit of that. So we're currently making a push for more folks to enroll in that program. On the general public side, some of that is we had some drivers leave as, you know, pandemic things go up and down. We had a vehicle go down. Some of that is just the logistics of running a transportation system. And then the other piece is that, you know, on occasion, as we sort of find the right, you know, we want to provide as many rides as we can. We also want to be reliable, and so sometimes, depending on the distances we're seeing and who's booking with us, we have to provide fewer rides to make sure that we can actually get people there because of our limited resources. So that's what you see. And there's also some ebbs and flows based on the time of year as well.
More question or?
Is this on? Okay. I was just wondering what the process is for users on how they book a ride, and also how you determine disability
Yep.
for a user.
Sure. To book a ride, all folks have to do is call our scheduling and dispatch team. They'll collect some information. We try to keep it a relatively low barrier to entry for folks. So really all we need to give you a ride is a phone number, and so we can contact you, and where to pick you up and where to drop you off. We do try to collect more information than that, but that's really like the base level of what we need from folks. All they have to do is call. As far as disability is concerned, all of the disability statistics you see here are self-declared. So we don't ask anybody to prove that. If they tell us that they have certain needs, we just sort of go with that. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Jim. You can see how amazing the Quabog Connector is and how much it means to that community. So next we're going to hear from Elizabeth Quirk from the Franklin Regional Transit Authority. She's going to talk about the FRTA's Fare Free Bus program. Elizabeth is also a long-term member of the Western Mass Transportation Advocacy Network and was really instrumental in helping to plan this forum. So everybody, please welcome Elizabeth.
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Elizabeth Quirk. I'm the chair of the Transit Advisory Committee for FRTA. I'm also a volunteer with the Community Health Improvement Project through Franklin Regional Council of Governments. These are both volunteer positions. And I'm really appreciative of all of the legislators and the actual administrators who are being paid large sums of money to deal with details such as the ones that were really important for me to clarify. We're talking today about a fare-free program for our fixed route bus service. And it's easy to think of it that way because passengers get on the bus and they don't pay a fare. But it's important to administrators, especially in front of legislators, for me to clarify that technically It's suspended fare collections that started in 2020 due to social distancing as part of the pandemic relief fund. The Transit Advisory Board voted to continue this funding using the federally provided Pandemic CARES Act funding. We had it voted to continue in 21, 22, and most recently in May of 23. So passengers do not have to pay fares through June 30th of 24. It has to keep being revoted though. FRTA projects to have obligated pandemic funding through fiscal year 28. And we are currently analyzing the costs of collecting fares as part of the 2023 review and update to FRTA's fare policy. Spoiler alert, it costs more to collect the fares than that we're actually getting, so, but this is very important to repeat because in today's socioeconomic climate, there are a lot of people that need to detail details and do a lot of paperwork with it, and I'm just a volunteer, so. Now we get to the good stuff. As I said, one more little piece of information though. As I said, it costs more to collect, count, and report the fares. It costs $1.9 million in 2019 in fixed route expenses, and we've collected $132,000 in fare collections just on the fixed route, and the cost to collect, count, and report all this was $180,000. $180,000 we paid to collect $132,500. And I've been riding the bus for a long time, so let me tell you what we were paying to do. Saw a mother get on the bus. She was 25 cents short. Kids are screaming. Mother's arguing with the driver. It's a mom. She said, yeah, that one took quite a while. I don't remember on that particular one because I saw over and over people arguing, do we pay, do you not pay? But the other guy let me get on anyway. And then, you know, some of them, yeah, they're going to think, well, somebody gets away with this, so how come I can't? And huge fights. And I haven't seen that since the pandemic started. We were paying to harass mothers for an extra 25 cents. There was a study done in Florida State University on all the RTAs and metro areas about fare free and trying to figure out, does it make sense? All right, in metro areas it actually makes sense, and I'll let them talk about why there, because we're here right now to talk about RTAs. RTAs, that 7% that I mentioned, that's pretty common. RTAs tend to only collect about 10% of the cost. So you could potentially be paying to harass the people out there. And as Quabog Connector mentioned earlier, people need this to get to work. How are they going to pay the 25 cents if they don't get to work to get the paycheck, to pay the 25 cents to get to work? That doesn't make sense. People getting to doctors, people getting their groceries, people getting to access their HIP benefits, and just being out in the community and seeing stuff and helping. I want to tell you about last week. Last week I was on my way to a couple appointments, and suddenly the bus stops someplace it normally doesn't, a narrow little road. And the driver's saying, "Are you all right, sir?" Kind of crane over to see what's going on. A guy had fallen off of his bicycle. Narrow road. Yeah, kind of the only way to get through. He said he lived down the road. But he's kind of like twitching there. He was on the side of the road, kind of hunched over his bike. I'm fine. I live down the road, but he's like twitching. And driver kept talking to him for a moment. I've got a little bit of medical background from back before I became disabled myself, and that twitching did not look good to me. Who else would have been out there and stopped and known to ask this guy, are you all right? He called in. The guy was saying he didn't want anything, but yeah, he did not look good. And I asked him if he normally twitched that way, and he looks up at me and he says, I hit my head pretty hard. He's got this huge lump here, another huge lump here. I see that. A couple of the other passengers got off. Yeah, we did have to go on our way, but a couple other passengers said we're close enough, we can walk from here. Ambulances blaring, you know, very soon afterwards. Ambulances blaring on the way back to the hospital. Like I said, I used to work in the medical field. You don't run the siren on the way from a scene to the hospital unless there's a darn big emergency, because you don't want to freak out your patient. Our bus driver probably saved that guy's life. Anybody else, you know, you want to respect a person's boundaries, so, you know, they say they're fine, they have the right to refuse. Well, you got something wrong that you hurt your brain, you aren't necessarily going to know you're not okay. That's part of just taking people where they need to go and being a human out there. As someone mentioned earlier, RTAs travel a lot further than the metro buses. They take, actually I don't think anyone mentioned this yet, but we take the vast majority of the people in Massachusetts where they need to go. And the MBTA is getting the majority of the funding. They don't have to go as far. They aren't taking as many people. And we aren't getting our fair share, I don't think, because they're getting most of it. And our bus providers are short-staffed, are underpaid, are doing this mostly out of the love of helping people and seeing the need, that there really is a need out there. Somebody else mentioned that their bus only gets through every half hour. We've got most of our buses, you know, I feel lucky to have one every hour. It does take all day to get somewhere. And that is something that I've heard from people, well, I've got a car because it just takes so long for the bus. Yeah, dedicate a whole hour just for the transportation part, and you've got a time when you get through the store and hopefully there isn't just suddenly a line of customers in front of you because you're waiting for an extra hour to catch the bus. I haven't owned a car though since 2016. I've been able to get it done, get everything done, get my health a great deal back because there was public transportation that could get me where I needed to go, get to the doctors, get better, and I can get back to the community at least as a volunteer and help, maybe even get better. But the whole planet needs to get better. Climate change is killing us, and the biggest driver is transportation. You see on those pictures of the skies right after we had lockdown, how fast the air cleared up when all those cars got off the road? Let's do that. Let's do that permanently. Let's fund the RTAs as much as is needed to get reasonable transportation for everyone. Any questions?
you so much to Elizabeth. All right, so next up we have Tate Coleman, who is going to tell us about the brand new Great Barrington Microtransit project that he has organized from start to implementation, and we're really excited to hear about this. It's the newest microtransit in the Western Mass region, probably in the whole state, right? Maybe.
So.
Yeah, so everybody please welcome Tate. Just use that arrow.
Yes, thank you everyone. So my name is Tate Coleman. I am the Microtransit Program Director for the town of Great Barrington in western Massachusetts in Berkshire County, southern part of Berkshire County. I'm also a master's student at the University of Massachusetts Amherst studying regional planning and civil engineering. And yeah, today I'm here to talk to you about this Tri-Town Connector, which is a rural microtransit pilot we've just started down there. So yeah, just a bit of a project background. For any of you unfamiliar with what microtransit really is, so microtransit is this shared ride on-demand rideshare service, and it's usually publicly operated and affordable. So it's sort of like a shared ride Uber or Lyft, but it's publicly operated, and the fare, well, in our area at least, if you try to get an Uber, it's going to be 40-something bucks to go a few miles. That's not really feasible for most of our residents here. And so I just put up a map here of our county in Berkshire County, overlaid with our environmental justice areas. So these towns here, Stockbridge, Great Barrington, and Egremont, down in the southern part, those are the communities that this pilot is running in. So yeah, this all started with a planning study, the Berkshire County Microtransit Planning Study, which I worked on with the Berkshire Regional Planning Commission, Anuja Koirala, who's the principal transportation planner at BRPC. So this also ended up doubling as my undergraduate senior thesis, but so the objectives there were initially to figure out how to integrate some sort of new microtransit service for the public into existing resources in our communities. So a lot of our small towns have council on aging transportation services with existing vans that might only be used a few weekdays between 8 and 4. And so looking at that, or ADA paratransit services, we use some mathematical models to estimate these vehicle and driver requirements. Yeah, so just moving forward here, the microtransit pilot project that was proposed after that study in early mid-2022 was something that would build off of existing council on aging resources, and the recommended zone was Great Barrington, Stockbridge, and Egremont based off of survey results. So we did a public input survey that received over 2,200 responses, which is huge for our rural areas. We have about 125,000 residents in Berkshire County, for reference here. So it was estimated to have about $290,000 additional cost. We selected the Great Barrington Council on Aging, which already had 3 vehicles here, and ran 8 to 4 on weekdays for the seniors. So we've expanded, I mean, first of all, this was recommended. There wasn't any funding. Oftentimes these projects, or these studies end there, but having grown up in Great Barrington, I had very personal tie to this project investment, and so I actually worked with the town of Great Barrington to look at grant funding, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute here. But anyway, we were successfully awarded funding to do a 1-year pilot project. So yeah, it runs 7 days a week. So the Regional Transit Authority runs fixed route service in our area, but it doesn't run on Sundays, doesn't run in the evenings. So yeah, workforce transportation and a greater degree of freedom for our seniors is really huge. Those are the main takeaways here of what this is trying to accomplish. So yeah, I've been pretty busy lately. So this pilot started on May 1st of this year, so about a month ago, and we do have funding for actually 14 months, which is great for this pilot. Been looking at community partnerships. Right here I have just a map with the pilot project zone with the environmental justice communities highlighted here. And yeah, so I also just wanted to share with you all some lessons learned from our implementation just in the past, month or two. Just very interesting here. So being a very technical person, or very detail oriented, I worked a lot on the technical details. I mean, we figured out all of the budgeting, the zone boundaries, the fare structure, everything like that. But of course, turns out if you can't hire drivers, then all that goes out the window, right? So that has been difficult. We ended up raising our base rate from 18 to 20 bucks an hour, which really helped with staffing. We're still short-staffed, so if you know anyone who's interested in driving for us, let them know. And then communication, both between me as the program director and the drivers, and also the drivers and the passengers. Just ensuring consistent communication has also been key here, and doesn't necessarily clearly follow, so something to keep in mind. We found, advertising is really a double-edged sword. We don't have enough drivers to, have increased capacity, then we don't want to advertise the service to have increased ride requests, because we don't want to turn anyone down. Anyway, so also advantages and disadvantages to using this app-based software. So we were transitioning from a more pen and paper version that the COA used, and they already had some existing senior ridership here. Transitioning to this app-based software was kind of difficult. A lot of our drivers are retired, they are part-time, and 55 and over, and that has been a little difficult. Now there's tablets in the vehicles. They don't get a list every day of these are the rides that you're going to be driving, because it may change throughout the day. And we've actually had major success. I mean, everyone is pretty much using it well now, but it was a big learning curve there. Conventional versus in-house, we went with an individual named Daniel Fitch, who has developed this software himself and provides it for 3 other microtransit systems in Massachusetts. And that's a lot more cost-effective and a lot more customizable than some other alternatives we explored, like VIA, which is sort of out-of-the-box type of software. But I think that spending that time and effort to really customize that to our needs. I mean, we have specific needs in our communities. Changing some of the icons on the maps. I mean, a lot of that just has made a huge difference in the success of this. Also, something we didn't necessarily think about right when we were implementing this is reduced fares were a major incentive for these seniors. So as a part of this project, we ended up reducing the existing $3.50 Council on Aging fare down to $1.50 for seniors. And so the first impact we saw was that these seniors were all of a sudden able to take a lot more of the same trips that they already were taking, which caused us to be a little overwhelmed right during the midday hours. That has smoothed out a little bit, and the evenings and weekends are really starting to pick up here. But that was the biggest impact we first saw. So that means that there was a big need that wasn't being met. Maybe someone can go to the supermarket multiple times a week instead of having to do all their errands on one day, which might be quite overwhelming for them. So that's one thing here. And then also same-day bookings have really provided a greater degree of freedom for our seniors. They used to have to book 2 days in advance. Now suddenly, they can book the same day here, which means they can take more spontaneous trips, go meet up with friends. It's a huge difference. And weekends have seen far more same-day bookings, which is not surprising. It's less medical appointments, more social recreational, those quality of life things. I mean, many of our riders right now are seniors, hoping as we continue to staff up, we'll see more, or we'll just be able to handle more riders overall. Saw like a 50% increase in just the existing riders, how many trips they were taking. So that's huge. Yeah, evenings we've seen strong workforce ridership, so that confirms to us that we're meeting an important need there. I'm not going to go through this quickly. I got my yellow warning here, but just leave this up here for a second. Just some operating funding breakdown. Our total pilot budget is about $406,000. That includes, you know, there's a decent chunk for training all of our new drivers. That's definitely an extra added cost for startup here. And then just briefly, I'm going to leave you with a long-term vision for our for our Southern Berkshire County region. I mean, this isn't like an isolated pilot project here. The long-term goal is to have some multiple smaller microtransit pilots in the region, which would be complemented by express bus service from the RTA. And so right now it takes 2 hours, over 2 hours to go just 20 miles between Great Barrington and Pittsfield, which is where a lot of the economic activity is happening. And so that's really looking at realigning those resources to better meet the needs of our communities, be a little more flexible here is really key and consistent with Berkshire Regional Planning Commission's HST, Human Services Transportation Plan goals. Anyway, thank you.
You mentioned about the reduced fare being a huge incentive, and I was curious about if there's been any examination on adjusting funds towards reducing fees on existing programs rather than or in addition to creating a new system and the operating costs around that, and also maybe wondering how much of your ridership are being served because there's not other services that would meet their needs in terms of location versus being more affordable.
Thank you. So I'll just note here that the core of our ridership right now, because we expanded off of the existing Council on Aging service, so that's really meeting a need. The core of our ridership is our senior population. We have, I think, 50% of our population is over 50, something like that, in our area. So a lot of them aren't able to drive anymore, and so their only ways to get around is get a ride with us, or maybe get a friend or neighbor to give them a ride. And so those trips were, a lot of these trips weren't necessarily being serviced before. They were just going out less, which is not what we want to see for our seniors. And so, we are meeting that need. It is, so I guess what we saw just in the first weeks when we really didn't advertise is, basically it was just expanding this existing service, reducing the fares, and what we saw is even just within the parameters of the service that was offered before, ridership skyrocketed from those existing riders, increased by about 50%. Once again, we didn't do much advertising right at the start as we work out all the kinks here, but so I think that reducing those fares, even though we thought that was just part of the whole program structure, it wasn't necessarily specifically deliberate to lower fares for seniors. It ended up being a major improvement for them.
What's your current ridership
Current ridership?
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're just at the end of the first month here, and like as we speak, my dispatcher is probably working on reconciling the numbers for the first month, but So the existing Council on Aging ridership was an average of about 16 riders per day. And so we've seen that, it's not exactly, but something like 50% more is what is trending. It's a little more every week. So, probably more like 23, 24 riders a day is what we're seeing here. And I'll just highlight just really quickly, a lot of our seniors get their Social Security checks in the beginning of the month. And so what historically the Council on Aging Service has seen is that right near the end of the month, the ridership drops into the single digits. And what we saw this month was not that. And I think that the huge difference in terms of how much they're having to pay for this service, and now they can buy like books of tickets at the beginning of the month that can last them for the month. Anyway, because we saw like 26 rides on the last day of the month here, when usually the Council on Aging would see 5 to 10 during those last few days, and we were really seeing that strong ridership continue. So, thank you.
Thank you, Tate. Just want to say I'm in awe of your project management skills. Getting this off the ground while getting your master's degree is truly, truly impressive. Also, I think every presentation we've seen so far makes a really great argument for fare-free transportation in general and how much of a improver of quality of life that can be, a driver of economic opportunity, and just a great service to people who live not just in cities but also rurally as well. So our next presentation is Eric Gonzalez. He is a professor at UMass, and he is going to tell us about his statewide mapping project that he did looking at food access in the Pioneer Valley. Welcome, Eric.
Thank you very much. Let's see. Okay, there I am. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Eric Gonzalez. I'm an associate professor in civil engineering at UMass. And I want to recognize collaborators on this project that was actually led by Dr. Eleni Christofa, who's another professor at UMass. A lot of the mapping work was done by a PhD student, Efthymia Kostopoulou, and Tate was involved as well. I realize I misrepresented you, Tate, because you're not only a Master of Science student, you're also a Master of Regional Planning student, dual degree, and I have the pleasure of serving as his advisor as well. So, one of the things that we wanted to look at in this project, and this was work that was funded by MassDOT, was looking at food access and how that relates to transportation. And so maybe these concepts are familiar to a lot of people in the room, but this idea that actually nationwide food accessibility is a problem for a lot of households, and there are these concepts like a food desert, being a community where there's just not an availability or access to healthy, affordable foods. Some other ones that we learned about sort of digging into this is the idea of a food swamp, right? That you may be in a community where there are not access to healthy and affordable foods, but there may be a glut of processed and fast foods. So that may be more common in urban areas. And then one that maybe speaks a lot to communities in Western Massachusetts, or the rural areas, is this idea of a food hinterland. Just that the populations are so dispersed and sparse, they can't support the kinds of food retailer density that you'd see in a more urbanized area, and that results in food access problems. So this project had a couple goals. Really, this comes out of a desire by MassDOT to find ways to measure and quantify different aspects of transportation system performance for making better planning decisions and figuring out how to use, if we're going to spend more money on transportation, what should we spend it on to actually make the best improvements for the communities in the state. I think it was a great point made with the Quebec connector that if you just count ridership on the transit system, it's going to look really small compared to Boston and Springfield, but we know that in those communities it makes a huge difference. So what do we need to be measuring to actually see that and quantify that and track that we're making progress for everybody across the state? So what we wanted to do is see, are there ways with data we can identify in a systematic way locations across Massachusetts that have a lack of food access? Are there models that we can use to identify, we know that rural areas are typically going to have less access than an urban area, but are there some rural communities that are disadvantaged compared to others? And then we recognize that every community is really quite different and has really specific local needs and details. And so we did include a piece that was a stakeholder engagement. We ran some focus groups in a couple communities. Working with MassDOT, we identified Deerfield and Amherst as a couple just to reach out to, and we had some really focused conversations about what does transportation and food accessibility look like in those communities. So we'll talk about that. We did an analysis across the state using census tracts as sort of the geographic scale because there's a lot of socioeconomic data that's available at that scale. And then there's a database of food retailers that MAPC has put together. So we know where all the supermarkets are across the state. And so we can map those and then do a GIS analysis of from different locations. How many supermarkets can you reach if you can drive a car, if you are walking, if you're riding a bicycle, or using the transit system, right? And that's really what we wanted to get a sense of. How does this vary across different locations, and how does it vary by mode? One of the things that we noticed was counting the number of supermarkets maybe wasn't the most representative number, because the types of food retailers that can count as a supermarket could be a really large, full-service supermarket that has sort of the breadth of all the types of products you'd imagine in a Stop and Shop or something. It could be also a small mini market. Sometimes these small ethnic markets, they might focus on spices or a particular type of food. It's not the full range, and they're often a lot smaller stores. So you could be in an urban environment where you can access 60 different stores, but they're all really small. That might actually serve your needs in a similar way that access to a handful of larger supermarkets in another neighborhood. So we looked at square footage as a proxy for the breadth of selection. And we know that we're missing some things. We don't have good data about what the cost or affordability of the food is. A Whole Foods shows up the same as a Aldi or Family Dollar, and we know that these are not really the same service for different types of customers, but this is a systematic data set that we can use. And what we're mapping here is using this GIS analysis for each of these census tracts, how many square feet of supermarket can you reach, and the darker colors indicate more square footage, right? So not surprisingly, if you look at the different modes here, you can generally reach a lot more by driving than you can on foot. That's no surprise, right? Because you can just travel a further distance. But if you look across the state, you can also see that even with a car, some parts of the state really you can't reach a lot because it's a rural area and the supermarkets aren't there, they're quite dispersed. So we wanted to get a sense of what is this disparity between the modes that people have access to and the locations across the state. So one of the things that we did was we did an equity analysis. And I don't know if anybody's familiar with the Lorenz curves. This is a technique usually used for looking at the distribution of wealth in a population. But we turn that wealth metric into a measure of food access. So we look at cumulative food access. If I can reach 100,000 square feet of supermarkets, that's my food access. If you can reach 1 million square feet of supermarkets, that's your access. And we rank them in order. And so we look at the share of the population on one axis versus the total cumulative food accessibility on the vertical axis. And if everybody in the state had the same access, we'd see this all line up along that diagonal. That's the line of equality. And the further you fall below that, what we're seeing is discrepancy. So the blue line here is for walking. About 2/3 of the population of the state cannot walk to a single supermarket within 10 minutes. That's probably not surprising, right? There's a lot of areas where things fall apart. And then there's a small population that can reach a whole lot. Those are the densest urban areas. So there's a lot of inequality in food accessibility by walking. It's a little bit better when you look by transit, a little bit better by bike, and it's not perfectly equitable, but it's more equitable by car, right? So having access to a car, being able to drive, is on some level an equalizer, but that means that those who cannot or do not drive are at sort of a further equity disadvantage. That's something to keep track of. So Deerfield was one that we looked at, right? Deerfield, Massachusetts, at the centroid of that census tract, you really can't get too much by walking. We also did some modeling to try to say, okay, well, we know that the food accessibility would be higher in urban areas than in rural areas. But what if we compare communities to other similar communities? Are there some that are relatively more advantaged than others? And so from this model, we looked at this gets technical, but sort of the difference between sort of the statewide trends and a particular community, and the areas that show up in pink are sort of have relatively lower access. The areas that show up in blue have relatively higher access. And so that's a way of sort of flagging communities that might otherwise look sort of like they all have good access or all have bad access, sort of in absolute magnitude. So we followed this up and said, rather than sort of painting in broad strokes with some general data sets, what the whole picture of the state is, what does this really look like in some particular communities? And so we held a couple focus groups. We invited representatives of some stakeholder organizations. We didn't go out to the general public in this. We went to representatives from organizations that sort of have a stake in the transportation and food access mode. I think some maybe here, right? Regional transit authorities, mass and motion coordinators, representatives from Council of Aging or senior centers. representatives from food banks and food charities. And we asked questions along these lines, right, for these discussions. What are the known food access gaps in those particular communities? What do they look like? What is the relationship? Do the statewide analyses that we presented, do they appear consistent with your understanding? And they did to a large extent. And we talked a lot about the role that transportation plays as a barrier to food access, and also brainstormed a little bit like what types of programs might address this. And we're hearing about a lot of those things in the presentations today. Just in broad strokes, in both groups, the importance of public transit for food accessibility was huge. I think that sort of rose to the primary sort of focus of the conversation, recognizing that for anybody who cannot or does not drive, the other modes that are available, for many people, it's really transit is the only realistic way to get to and from supermarkets and carrying groceries and things like this. And so the limits on transit translate into limits on food access. In both communities, there have been work with mobile markets and pop-up food pantries, and these are measures to try to bring food closer to people. That's one way to bridge that spatial gap. The flip side of that being we can try to find ways to get people to where their food is. And we also heard about some policies and regulations that can restrict transportation of food and people in a way that can be a bit challenging. So one example is if there are limits that the transit drivers allow for bags that can be carried onto a vehicle, that limits how much food somebody can buy in a single trip, or how much food they can pick up from a food pantry in a single trip. That creates a barrier, right? Or there are legal restrictions if you use like FTA funds to purchase a vehicle to move people. There's restrictions on using that van at other times of day to move food. Some of those were waived during the pandemic, but that's something, are these just arbitrary policies that we should be looking at? Are they creating barriers that don't really need to be there? So there are a number of recommendations that we're sort of putting together out of this study, and we'll be finalizing these in a report with Mass DOT that will be available in the next couple months publicly. But they come down to, one is the importance of tracking food accessibility with data. If you can measure it, you can communicate it, and you can make this case that it's worth bringing resources to a community. So that's really powerful. It's important to coordinate municipalities and regional planning agencies to support the provision of food. I'll wrap this up really fast. I'm seeing the red flag. Yep. Finding ways to deliver food to the people, right? Whether that be subsidizing delivery programs. A big piece, and a lot of what we talked about, was ways of expanding transit service. Microtransit being a big one of them, using data to figure out where that makes the most difference. And then improving the integration between agencies, which we're hearing a little bit about. But those barriers, again, those create extra travel time for people. I'll leave it at that. I'm happy to answer questions. Thank you very much.
I'm curious, and I understand you said that the funding is from the Department of Transportation, and maybe this is something that like the Department of Agriculture would want to say as well. I'm wondering if you have thought about or what the implications would be to add like CSA food shares to that, like the gaps that they fill in this food service that aren't included in like
We did. I mean, obviously, I didn't have time to talk about everything. We did look at farmers markets and CSAs as one. Those are a little patchy, right? In the places that they exist, it's great. One of the challenges is a lot of times that they have really limited hours. In some places, farmers markets are also not seen as affordable. I know in Amherst that's a complaint, right? The farmers market's great. It's all local. It's also kind of expensive. So that's a piece of that puzzle, and it's an important one. And thank you for that question. Yeah.
I'm feeling increasingly guilty for cutting people off, so sorry.
Yeah, Springfield is not in the focus groups. So in terms of talking to particular groups, we know that this is just a snapshot from a couple communities. We did want to draw some attention to rural communities or areas with lower population densities because a lot of the literature out there has been focused on urban food deserts and food insecurity in urban areas, which we know is a problem, right? But sometimes the rural areas are getting overlooked. And so, it's part of a bigger picture to look across the whole state of all communities. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Eric. So this next presentation is in a similar vein. It's one that I'm really excited about because this was a project that is between the Western Mass Transportation Advocacy Network and Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, and it was funded in part by T for Mass. So Elise is here from T for Mass. I want to thank you again for the funding for this. Also funding from Feeding America, which is our food bank's parent organization, is part of this project as well. So we're going to hear from Molly Jackson-Watts and Jake Dollinger from Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, and they are going to talk about the GIS map that they just finished within the last week that looks at the gaps of transportation routes, so bus routes and microtransit routes in the 4 counties of Western Mass, and then overlays that with access to major employers, major higher ed institutions, major medical centers, and grocery stores. So really excited to welcome Molly and Jake to talk about the GIS mapping project.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. I'm going to stand over here or I'll be hidden by... Can you hear me? I'll be hidden by the podium. So I'm Molly Jackson-Watts. I'm Manager of Data, Education, and Municipal Technology at the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission. My colleagues Jacob Dollinger, our GIS specialist, and Jacob Tilch, who is our data analyst. Pioneer Valley Planning Commission covers all of Hampden and Hampshire counties, but this project, as was mentioned, covers Franklin and Berkshire counties. I'm just going to give a quick overview of the project, although I think actually that was a great introduction that we just got, and then give things over to Jake to really show you the tool that we built that we hope is going to be useful to you in all of your work. So the real goals of this project, I feel like I'm still hiding over here, was to create a tool to help all of you with answering the questions of how possible or impossible is it to get to those key places that people need to get to in their lives using public transportation. And this was a question that the food bank came to us to help answer. And yeah, go ahead. Purposes were to create an online tool to let you do that, and to use that for advocacy purposes and for transit users to get a sense of how they can get from one place to another. Again, the food bank hired PVPC and was a consultant in helping us understand what would be useful to have on the map. PVPC created the tool, and the Berkshire Regional Planning Commission also helped provide data on the transit authorities as well as the Franklin Regional Council of Governments. And I'm going to pass it over to Jake to talk about the tool we built.
Great. Better. Hello, everyone. My name is Jacob Dollinger. I am a senior planner and GIS analyst at the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission. I'm going to give you just kind of a cursory overview of the data layers that we have put into this web application and the process in doing that without getting into any real kind of technical jargon, if you will. So the data layers that are presented on this online tool are major employers and services. That does also include food pantries as well as grocery stores. And as I'll show you later on, the grocery stores are also actually categorized by the type that they are. So whether or not they are a stop and shop or a convenience store or a corner store, if you will. Additionally are the regional transit routes, which have pop-up box information to get greater detail. There are links to all the schedules for each of the routes in there, so the end user can go in and can plan their day out more specifically. In addition to that are the generalized coverage routes. So we went in and we generalized all of the hours of operations for all of the routes into whether or not they fit into a first, second, or third work shift, and then coded them based off of whether or not it provided a full service or partial service, meaning you could get maybe dropped off for your second shift, but you couldn't get picked back up, and the like for third shifts as well. And then in addition, we have the micro-transit coverage areas, which just highlights the towns that are utilizing micro coverage or micro-transit coverage, and by the organization that is providing it. And then additionally, pop-up box information where you can get details on how to use it, where you can download fill out the forms for accessibility. The process in doing this was to receive data from the food bank. Actually provided us with data for employers and grocery stores, pantries, etc. And we geocoded that and added in some values to run summary statistics into that. Like I said, we generated the work shift coverages, and then we did a spatial join with those two data sets in order to provide summary statistics, meaning that you can look at a bus route, you can click on it, and it will say, this along this bus route there are 32 convenience stores, 8 major employers, X amount of medical providers. Additionally, you can look at that data and it will tell you that of those 32 major employers, 12 of them offer first shift only, 6 offer second shift, and 4 offer a third shift. So you can kind of look at the bus routes and see kind of what they could potentially service, because as you'll see with the overlays, very few actually service more than a drop off or a pickup for second or third shift. We published this to Esri ArcGIS Online, and then built a web map and application for the end user. And with that, I'll just give you a quick demo and show you kind of what the tool looks like. Let's see if I can. Where's the control button? There. Hopefully we should be able to link to this. It's not linking. It's not linking. Oh, there it goes. I guess I didn't have to push control. Okay, so you can see here's the basic interface. You can see also you don't have employees until you zoom in a bit. Sorry, I'm used to doing this with a mouse and instead of a touchpad. There you go. And you see as you zoom in a bit, the location points start to come in. The end user, whether they be a citizen or a planner, can click on any of the information on the map to get the pop-up boxes. We additionally added in shift availability for all of the employers or food pantries or whatever they may be. You have all of your hours of operations, whether or not they offer a first shift, second shift. As you oh, I'm sorry. As you get this to zoom in. Struggling with the touchpad here. Sorry, I can't seem to get this to zoom in. Yeah, oh, there we go. I can double tap it. Sorry about that. As you zoom in here, you can see the I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with this computer. You can see the coverage areas for the shifts that are highlighted as buffers. So you can just really look at the map and see everywhere in the teal covers first shift, everywhere in the light yellow you can get dropped off for a second shift, and in the orange you can get picked up for a third shift. When you click on the routes, you can see here where you can get all of the route information here. So you can see weekday first shifts, and we do have these values here for whether or not they're drop off, pickup, limited service, the like. You can come down here and you can see that the total number of employers on the route are 9, grocery stores 4, food pantries, etc. You can continue to go down here and you can see how many of those employers offer a first shift, second shift, third shift, etc. And then you can obviously go back then and look at the routes and see whether or not the routes would support these locations.
But I think that one of the key pieces here, and we'd love to talk to you about it at the roundtable, is there's a lot of power in this tool in terms of looking at the difference between what employers are along a route and the shifts that are offered, and giving the information about, well, you can take this to work, but you can't get home from work, or those kind of pieces. And so our project was to create this tool for that use. Obviously, it's not just employers, medical, all of that kind of thing. But we're happy to talk with all of you. And then I think the food bank in helping create this tool is looking to help have this be useful in the community, to look at highlighting what those gaps are, both for advocacy, for increased service, for funding opportunities, or where those micro transit projects that have been mentioned might be of use.
Thank you so much. So in the interest of time, because we're running late, we are going to shuffle the schedule a little bit. So right now we're going to have a 3-minute stretch and bathroom break. Before we do that, we are going to welcome Senator John Vilas, whose district we are in. Thank you so much for being here. He's going to come up and say one word. And then we're going to come back. We're going to hear our last 2 presentations, which you do not want to miss. And then we're going to combine lunch with the working groups. So before we break for lunch, I will tell you where working groups are going to be, and you can grab your lunch from the big theater and then come back and join whichever working group you want to be part of. We will eat and work. We'll have a working lunch, and that way we'll have time to get everything in. So thank you for your indulgence with that, and welcome, Senator Vilas.
Representative, don't you love it when you have a speaker right before lunch? Yeah, that's me. I really just wanted to say hello and welcome everybody. I know Rep. Duffy did, Rep. Savinosa, I know Sarah Oliveira's office is here, and just everybody else that's here that I can't see. I am so impressed with what I have heard the past 45 minutes. Kind of a transportation focus on the 4 Western Mass counties. This is something that you've all heard before, but I'm going to say it again just briefly. We just last week we finished the budget on the Senate side. There's a lot of good things, there's a lot of conversations that happen, but one of the things that we say it all the time, to kind of view this topic and many others based on where you are in the Commonwealth, right? There are profound differences with transportation needs here, housing needs, really fill in the blank with the 4 Western Mass counties than there are in other places. Now, I know that every single person in this room is saying, yeah, no kidding, tell us something we don't know. But I am here to tell you that that is an ongoing dialogue that myself, Rep. Duffy, Rep. Savinosa have to make on a very continuing basis. For example, in our last caucus before, the caucus is just when we kind of group and have meetings as a political party. So for me, it's with Democrats, etc. We started going into some of the transportation stuff in the budget, and there was an inordinate focus on the MBTA. look, I don't, and as I constantly remind people, you know, the overwhelming majority of my constituents do not ride the MBTA. So let's talk about it. Let's see if we can help it. I'm not for helping the MBTA, but always, 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 we need to talk about the other transportation needs that are in this Commonwealth. I love how you folks kind of tied it to food security. So this is just really remarkable stuff. And I'll finish with this. You are the subject matter experts on this. So anybody that wants to follow up, and I'm going to speak for my colleagues because I know they are the type of colleagues who want to meet with people and talk to people. You are the proverbial boots on the ground that are doing really cool things, and we want to hear about it. So thank you for coming today. Thank you for contributing to this conversation, and enjoy your lunch.
Thank you, Senator Vilas. Okay, 3-minute stretch break, and then we're going to come back and we are going to hear our last 2 presentations from the Fair Access Program at Craig's Doors and the Holyoke Farmers Market. You will not want to miss those. And then we're going to have a delicious lunch. If you're starving and you cannot wait, there are still muffins and snacks over there. You can have a little bit. Hey everyone. Sorry to interrupt lunch. We're going to have our last 2 presentations now. Also, there's still plenty more food. If anybody wants to go grab seconds, you can feel free to go in and get more food. So we're going to have our last 2 presentations. We will have time for a couple of questions after each one, and then we'll let everybody finish up lunch, and we will do breakout sessions. So first up, we have Jack Myers and Tim McCarthy from Craig's Doors in Amherst. Craig's Doors is a shelter for unhomed people, and they have developed this very cool Fair Access program giving bus passes to their clients who are experiencing homelessness. They're going to tell us about the program, about the data they're collecting, and about what they are finding with the Fair Access program. So everybody please welcome Jack and Tim.
We're rolling with punches. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for having us. Can you hear me okay? Awesome. So my name is Tim McCarthy. I'm the executive director of Craig's Doors out in Amherst, Mass. For those who are unfamiliar with us, we are a shelter-focused human services provider. And I'm going to try and make this happen without our slides. Just to share a little bit about us as an organization, and again, I know that we're the housing nerds in a room full of transit nerds, so bear with us. Thank you for the lack of violence, and hopefully we can maintain that peace. So as an organization, we had an administrative swap about a year ago and really wanted to take advantage of the opportunity to sort of emphasize innovation and reimagining what it means to provide shelter for folks who are unhoused. And I think we kind of wanted to start with an emphasis on sort of our transition in terms of values and principles, which was the most radical shift initially. And there's a lot of narrative surrounding this sort of more neoliberal capitalist idea that homelessness is a product of individuals making poor decisions for themselves. And the first thing that we wanted to do was to shift that narrative and recognize that folks who are unhoused are the victims of racist and classist policies and institutions that have failed them in their responsibilities to support the most vulnerable members of our communities. That's part one. Cool, thanks. And so trying to innovate a space that we inherited required a variety of approaches, a lot of which entailed changing some basic policies, one of which was maintaining a low threshold policy, which is the not so radical idea that coping mechanisms, no matter how maladaptive, should not prohibit someone from being able to access fundamental survival resources. So if you have complex mental health issues, if you have active substance use disorder, we totally welcome you into our space and try and provide as much as an emulation of a home setting as possible. We instituted really comprehensive activities programs in an effort to create a sense of community. And most importantly, we transitioned from an overnight seasonal model to a 24/7, 365 model. Our folks are able to stay in a safe space, to be able to depend on staff who treat them with dignity, while simultaneously doing our best to maintain unconditional positive regard for the guest, and still holding up a level of autonomy and again emphasizing self-efficacy. So anyways, imagine a bunch of values listed, and then I would point to them and you'd be like, those are good values. I agree with those values. Having said that, I want to pass it over to Jack, who is really the father of this program, and he'll share the deets and how it all came about. Thanks so much.
So I started working at Craig's Doors about 2 years ago, and one of the first experiences I remember with a guest is that they asked me for a bus pass. And at the time, we only had about 20 one-way passes for emergency medical purposes. And where he needed to go, it was an important appointment, like a housing or immigration services, but it wasn't for an emergency medical purpose, so I couldn't give him the bus pass. And he responded by saying something like, well, you know, how do you expect me to get out of here? And I honestly think I froze, and I didn't really know what to say to that. It was very powerful. Why are shelters, not just Craig's Doors, but ones across the country, kind of a safety net when they should be more like a trampoline? And so, and that wasn't the only time we saw the issue. About a year later, as a case manager, and one of my clients who was in and out of homelessness for about 20 years, he waiting for the Section 8 wait list for so long that he didn't remember when he applied. He finally received a voucher. So we were really excited, and our housing search was very frantic because you only have a few months to find a place that fits HUD's requirements. So a lot of places, they wouldn't rent to him, or it didn't fit the requirements. So we finally found a place that checked off the boxes, and we set up a tour. And so the day came, and he wasn't there. So I called him to see where he was, and he said I didn't have enough money for a bus pass. So after, being homeless for almost 20 years, he missed the rare opportunity for affordable housing with a voucher because he didn't have a few dollars in his bank account. And so that really made us wonder, how could the government and communities and nonprofits fail people so severely over something so small? And so we, Craig's Doors, decided to do something about it. And then essentially in March 1st, 2023, after getting funding from the Amherst Crest Department, we started our Fair Access program. And so with that program, guests can receive one free PVTA bus pass, a day pass, every single day for whatever reason they choose. So every time, and every time a guest receives a bus pass, we'll be collecting data to see where our guests need to go and why. And we're also collecting demographic, health, financial, and survey data throughout the course of the program, just to assess how fare free transit affects people experiencing homelessness. And we also distribute additional bus passes to community partners for members of the community who are homeless but aren't staying with us, or if our guests are concerned with privacy, sharing their data, then they can go there because we don't want to hold this over their head. We want them to have access to fare free transit too. So next, just getting into the data. For the people who agreed to share their data, which is pretty much all of them, they want to participate. 16% are seniors, 64% have a disability, 34% have a chronic health condition, and 30% are victims or survivors of domestic violence. From a financial standpoint, the average income of a program participant is $483 a month. That's the average income, and 30% report receiving no income at all. Then we'd have these slides that have pie charts, on where they're going and why they're going there. But I just got the 1 minute mark, so I'll try to be quick. But essentially, we've seen guests get a new job. One guest, he was having trouble finding work in Amherst, so he went to Northampton, and then was walking around seeing who was hiring, got an interview, got a job, and then got to work after that using these free bus passes. And so people will tell our guests things like, why don't you just get a job? Well, how do you expect them to get to work before their first paycheck hits? And we got a ton on where they're going. Qualitative data is really amazing. 95%, a little over 95%, say that their quality of life has improved. We have a lot more data and statistics because we're running short on time. If you want to come up and talk to us after, we'll talk about it. But first, we got to give one shout out to Rep. Mindy Dom. She couldn't be here today. But Lily from her office is here today. And so Rep. Mindy Dom amended the House budget proposal to keep this program going for another year. So it was set to end on July 26th with the funding we have, and because of Rep. Mindy Dom, hopefully we can keep this going for another year. And then Tim is going to talk really briefly about some work we're doing with the PBTA kind of together with this program to get people out of their bus shelters.
Sure. Yeah, super quick. Thank you, Jack. And again, I really do suggest that folks come up and have a conversation with Jack. The data is really compelling. He has some testimonials that are really incredible, and I think that most importantly is recognizing that we can talk about all of these services as human rights, but if an individual is unable to physically access those services, they're no longer rights, those are privileges. And we need to return the dialogue back to talking about human rights, improving quality of life, improving accessibility and self-efficacy. And in order to do that, we need to provide folks with the tools that are required to get there. So again, transit becomes the string that connects all of these rights, and we, as an organization, believe that access to transit is in itself a human right. I also want to shout out Paul Burns and thank the PBTA for their partnership in this initiative. We're also going to be engaging in an outreach campaign to the bus shelters themselves, where unfortunately some of the most vulnerable members of our community find themselves protecting themselves from the elements during more inclement weather periods. And so we'll be popping out, making sure that those spaces are clean and safe, and more importantly, ensuring that the people who are literally residing there have access and are familiar with the resources to get them into a more humane state of existence. And I think that that's all we got. Oh, go ahead. Yep. One
Sorry, I know we're over. Can I just finish with a testimony from a? Okay. Okay. All right. So. Okay. So rather than just listening to us, we think to end it, it would be best leaving with a quote. We ask in our survey data how this bus pass program has impacted them. And so this is a quote from one of the guests. He said, as one struggling to survive day to day, as well as trying to lift myself out of homelessness and poverty, I can say that it's easy for a seemingly small obstacle, such as a bus fare, to loom quite large. The bus lines are our lifelines. So this program has already made a measurable difference in what I've been able to plan and accomplish on a daily basis. It's one less stressor in a stress-filled life. Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions? Do you have time for questions? Yeah, take that. Oh.
Did you find that we had done bus passes and laundry tokens at one point, and we were finding that people were bartering with them and not necessarily using them?
Yeah, so we track it, and we actually haven't found really like any quantitative evidence of that. People are using them.
If I could also just, we had the same concern, and so when we were trying to figure out how to make the program the most efficient, one of the first conversations was monthly bus passes, and taking into account the potential for that being a higher value item. And again, I think that in our experience, it's a narrative that just hasn't come to light. Folks are using them exactly in the way that you or I would use them. They are using them to go and see their daughters and their sons and their support networks. They're using them to go to the grocery store. They're using them to go and apply for jobs and look for apartments and to be members of their community. When you're in a shelter setting, I think one piece that goes totally underlooked or appreciated is the sense of isolation. So despite the fact that you're in a community of folks who are experiencing similar circumstances, unless you have access to be able to, especially in Amherst, to get out into the neighboring communities, many of which where these folks are from, communities of origin, they're not going to have that same, again, I keep repeating the phrase, but that quality of life is going to remain diminished. They're going to be stuck. And when we're talking about the mental health crises that I think everyone is experiencing, whether directly or through family or friends, if you put someone in a state of isolation and you marginalize them and then you add stigma to that circumstance, it's incredibly difficult for them to overcome those challenges. And so providing them with these bus passes and again, assuming that they're doing the right thing, right? Assuming that they're utilizing these passes because they're human beings whose circumstance does not define their integrity is kind of the basis of what we've seen.
Right. And yeah, one of the big parts was the same mobility and public transportation autonomy that we all kind of take for granted. And so we're seeing 86% improvements in mental and physical health. Quality of life has gone up. So, and we can see with what's going on in their lives because we know these people very personally, that why they're using the bus passes aligns with it. And so, yeah, we kind of wanted to give them the benefit of the doubt to see what happens when our guests get the same autonomy as we do. And we're proud to say that there's no other program like this in the country. We're the first program where all shelter guests get fare-free public transit all day or every single day for whatever reason they choose. The first one is in Western Massachusetts.
I can project. Okay. I'm really just curious if you noticed like difference in how people were using or accessing the bus like seasonally.
Yeah. So we started tracking over time how people are using them, and it's hard to tell because this started in March. So as the program started going, we're watching the use of the bus passes go up, not only with us, but with our community partners. So it could be seasonally, it could also just be because people are figuring out about the program, and use is going up in that way. So, but our estimate is probably in the summertime as it goes on, we'll see use go up because it's warmer out. And we see that just by talking to the guests that they get outside more when it's warmer. Yeah.
I can project too. So, it's just teach school. So, do you ever recruit or have employers come in to interview and recruit guests in your facility that may have businesses along the bus route? I know two businesses along line 31 that are looking to hire people right now. Do you ever try to do that?
Yeah, so you got it.
Sure. So if I heard the question correctly, essentially, are we collaborating with local businesses that are along the bus routes in an effort to try and help guests find job placement? Yeah. So again, when we were talking about how we observe our particular challenge and goal as sort of reimagining and innovating, this is one of our first programs of its nature. One of the biggest struggles that we have in innovation is funding, because state contracts are incredibly rigid in terms of where all of our funding goes, and it inevitably has to be directly correlated to programmatic function of the emergency shelter itself. So with that said, in conjunction with the Fair Access Program and its radical success so far, we're moving into a space where we are working with the BID and working with the Chamber of Commerce is the hope, in an effort to identify those community partners. And we're developing a workforce program that combines not only access to to job opportunity, but it combines it with case management so that we can ensure that when an employer might not be getting the results, rather than just simply denying them that opportunity for further employment, we're working with the guest driven to identify why those behaviors are existing, what potential solutions we have in an effort to overcome them, so that we're working collaboratively as a community to ensure that not only are people getting jobs, but they're remaining successful in those posts.
All right. Thank you. Go this way.
All right, incredible work. All right, so our last presentation is Alexis Diaz of the Holyoke Farmers Market, and he is going to talk about the innovative program that they are doing in collaboration with the Holyoke Chamber of Commerce to bring people to the farmers market who may not otherwise be able to get there. So everybody, please welcome Alexis.
Mic check. Hello, everybody. I think I'm just going to grab it. Everybody else. Hi. Hope everybody's having a good afternoon. My name is Alexis Omar Diaz de Jesus, and I am the Holyoke Farmers Market Manager. When I saw that the Holyoke Farmers Market was seeking a new market manager, I quickly jumped to the opportunity. As a young man who grew up in South Holyoke, I can attest to the access, that there's no access to fresh produce and knowledge surrounding HIP benefits, and it's not something that you see happening in the community where I grew up. As the market manager, I have made it a priority to uplift members of the community where this access is not common and educate EBT users on the HIP program. Food access is a passion of mine and has helped me further the mission of Holyoke Farmers Market. For the past 3 months, I have been working on a hydroponic farm in Williamsburg, Mass, Pause and Pivot Farm, learning the management, uptake, and business of urban sustainable farming. My goal is to bring this education and innovative technology back to Holyoke community. Creating this opportunity will allow families and individuals to have access to more locally grown produce year-round. Additionally, this summer, I will be working for Eagle Eye Institute, overseeing members of our youth rebuilding a greenhouse on the Dean campus. Providing leadership opportunities and equitable food opportunities has allowed me to grow in the Holyoke Farmers Market and tap into sectors that have not been reached out to. The Holyoke Farmers Market has been providing the greater Holyoke community with access to local farms since the 1960s. However, over the years, we have seen how our market has struggled with providing every member of our community an equitable access to these benefits. The Holyoke Farmers Market is one of the only HIP access points in the Holyoke and Western Mass. And with food equity and transportation being a major issue in our community, it is crucial that we do what we can to close the gap on this crisis. We have been honored to be able to collaborate with the Holyoke Health Center through their Feeding America grant to be able to provide complimentary transportation with Valley Transport to do what we can to ensure that members of our community where access to fresh produce and transportation remains a systematic problem are still able to utilize their HIP benefits, buy fresh produce, and shop local. Since late summer 2022, throughout the winter, Valley Transporter has been circulating through the public housing communities where access to fresh produce and opportunities to use their HIP benefits are scarce. Although it's been some months, the shuttle service remains underutilized. We have connected with managers of the housing communities to help spread the word, but it's not enough. We need more help sharing this amazing benefit. The more we can to aid in helping Holyokers get full access to fresh produce and taking advantage to their HIP benefits, and more we can better eliminate the food equity gap that remains stagnant in our city. We frequently partner with the City Holyoke Mass in Motion Coordinator to provide pop-up markets and incentives for the folks to come to the market, and have recently partnered with Holyoke Medical Center and Gary Rome Honda to provide reoccurring pop-up markets throughout the week. This is an opportunity to extend our reach and help members of our community gain access to local and fresh produce. We look forward to continuing this partnership with Holyoke Health Center and Valley Transport so that we can have, as a community of leaders, better serve and the families and individuals of Great Holyoke. Thank you for your time.
also having different posting on the different community pages, like when we have our mobile pantry, that helps to spread the word. So I don't know if you have posted or had anyone do that on, any community boards or things like that, or even with any of the, like Holyoke Media and things like that, that may have advertising or promotional stuff in Spanish or other languages to help spread the word.
Thank you. I've been working on some like social media marketing stuff and basically testing things and trying new things. I think for me, what I've been having the best luck with is the word of mouth, people talking and just letting people know in person. It's what works for me the best. Especially most people that go to the farmers market are elderly people, and they're not on Facebook as often as I am or my coworkers and stuff like that. But I know that when I see them walking around or at the park or at a bus station, I like to talk to them and let them know that there is a farmers market still happening and where it is. And usually I see them that weekend and they come with their friends and family. And I would like to bring that more, we can talk about it more. Please let people know that the Holyoke Farmers Market happens every Saturday at 10:30 to 3 at the Heritage Street in Holyoke, Massachusetts. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexis. Okay, so now we get to the part where we all get to just network and brainstorm and do some good sharing of best practices, etc. So here's how this is going to work. Anybody who wants to be part of the GIS mapping conversation, so that's both GIS mapping projects, is going to be in this room. In the big theater, we are going to have anybody who wants to be part of fare-free bus discussion. So the two fare-free bus groups, we're going to combine you into one group. And anybody wants to talk about fare-free buses in there? Also in there is the microtransit, right?
So fare-free buses is in that little room right behind
Okay,
us.
sorry. Fare-free buses is in the restaurant directly across the hall. So the two fare-free bus groups, if you're interested in anything fare-free bus, you can go in there. And then in the big room is the mobile markets and microtransit, right?
The farmer's market.
Yeah. So please designate somebody in your group to take notes. We've got these big pads and markers, and we just want to get an idea of what was discussed. We have about 40 minutes to have that conversation. Then we're going to, this is going to be tough. We're going to have everybody come back in here, rip the paper off of your pads, and we're going to do a very quick report out. If we end up not having time for the report out, Emily and I will compile those notes and we will share them with the emails. So thank you again all for being here. It's been such a great informational session, and we really appreciate your presence.